totemist, dancing in the dark. I never noticed him watching me, not at first. Looking back, I wonder how I missed the signs, the lingering presence, the too frequent coincidences, the feeling of being observed when I was supposedly alone. But hindsight reveals patterns invisible in the moment, doesn't it? And sometimes not seeing is a form of self-protection. I'd been working at Palmer's bookshop since graduating with my English literature degree last year. It wasn't my dream job, but there was something comforting about being surrounded by stories while I figured out my own next chapter. The shop smelled of paper, coffee from the cafe corner, and the lavender sachets Mrs. Palmer tucked between classics to keep the words fresh, as she liked to say. My days followed a pleasant rhythm, shelving new arrivals in the morning, helping customers find their next favorite read by afternoon, and closing with Jen or Marcus in the evenings. I prided myself on remembering regulars' preferences: historical fiction for Mr. Abernathy, true crime for Dr. Lynn, poetry collections for the quiet woman who never offered her name but smiled softly when I set aside new Emily Dickinson analyses. The shop was my sanctuary after chaotic college years marked by overcommitment and a particularly devastating breakup with my long-term boyfriend. Sam had been my first love, my first everything, and his sudden decision that we'd grown in different directions left me reeling just months before graduation. The bookshop, with its predictable patterns and peaceful atmosphere, felt like the perfect place to rebuild my sense of self. My apartment reflected this same desire for tranquility. It wasn't much. A one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted house, about 15 minutes walk from work. But I'd made it mine in all the ways that mattered. My mother called it my urban jungle therapy, and she wasn't wrong. The first unusual doorbell ring came on a Tuesday evening in late September. I remember because I'd just gotten home from my first creative writing workshop at the community center, something I'd finally worked up the courage to join after months of telling myself I would. I was still buzzing with creative energy, mentally revising the short piece I'd shared with the group. When the bell chimed at 8:43 p.m., I wasn't expecting anyone. My social circle had contracted significantly post-graduation as friends dispersed for jobs and graduate programs across the country. Still, I didn't think much of it as I set down my notebook and went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw no one. The hallway was empty. Must have been a mistake, I murmured, returning to my kitchen where leftover pasta waited in the microwave. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time, I was already in pajamas, halfway through a novel I'd borrowed from the shop. The digital clock on my microwave read 10:17 p.m. When the doorbell rang, again, the peephole revealed an empty hallway. I frowned, a flicker of unease passing through me. Was someone playing a prank? Kids from the first floor, maybe? It wasn't until the third occurrence that I actually saw him. The bell rang at precisely 10:17 p.m., just as it had before. When I checked the peephole, the hallway wasn't empty. A figure stood on my welcome mat. Average height, thin build, unremarkable features. And he was dancing? His arms extended outward in a fluid motion, body swaying rhythmically, almost hypnotically. There was something both graceful and deeply unsettling about the movement. "Hello?" I called through the door, my voice betraying more confidence than I felt. "Can I help you?" The dancing stopped abruptly. For several seconds, The figure remained perfectly still, head tilted slightly as if listening. Then he turned and walked away, movements deliberate and unhurried. I stood frozen at my door, long after his footsteps faded, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. That night, I pushed my dresser in front of the door before I could sleep. In the harsh light of morning, I felt foolish about my reaction. It was probably just a neighbor with the wrong apartment, or maybe someone intoxicated who'd gotten confused. The dancing was odd, certainly, but not inherently threatening. At Palmer's, the day proceeded normally until mid-afternoon when Jen nudged me as I arranged a display of fall reading recommendations. "Your admirer is back," she whispered, nodding toward the history section. I glanced over, spotting a customer partially hidden behind a shelf of World War II biographies. Something about his posture, the careful way he held himself, how he seemed to be looking at me rather than the books, sent a ripple of recognition through me. He ducked his head quickly when our eyes met, but not before I placed him, the dancing man, from my doorway. "Do you know him?" I asked Jen, trying to keep my voice casual. "Not really. He's been in maybe 5 or 6 times in the past couple weeks. Always when you're working." She grinned, interpreting my interest as reciprocal attraction. "Want me to create a reason for you to help him?" "No," I said, too quickly. Jen raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I'm sure if he needs help, he'll ask." Throughout my shift, I felt his eyes following me. When I worked the register, he browsed nearby shelves. When I shelved returns, he appeared in the same section, always maintaining distance, never approaching directly. By closing time, my shoulders ached from the tension of being watched. That night, I called my friend Megan. "Am I overreacting?" I asked after explaining the doorbell incidents and the bookshop customer. "It could be completely innocent, right? Maybe he just lives in my building." "Maybe," Megan said, her tone suggesting she didn't believe it any more than I did. "But trust your instincts, Liv. If something feels off, it probably is." My instincts were screaming by the 5th doorbell ring. Same time, 10:17 p.m., same dance. But this time, when I called out, he spoke. "I've been waiting for you to notice me," he said, voice soft and oddly melodic through the door. "I've been practicing my dance. Do you like it?" I backed away from the door, phone already in hand. "I don't know you," I said, dialing 911. "Please leave, or I'm calling the police." "But you do know me," he insisted. "I see you every day, at the bookshop. You always smile at me." "That's my job," I said, the operator's voice now in my ear asking about my emergency. "I smile at everyone." "Not like you smile at me," he said, as I told the operator there was someone refusing to leave my door. "We have a connection. I can feel it." By the time police arrived, he was gone. The officers took a report, looked appropriately concerned, but explained there wasn't much they could do. No threats had been made. No laws broken beyond, perhaps disturbing the peace. "Keep your doors locked," the younger officer advised. "Call us if he comes back and makes any threats." The next day, I spoke to Marcus about the man from the bookshop. His friendly demeanor hardened as I described the doorbell incidents. "Show me who he is if he comes in today," he said. "We can ban him from the store." But the man didn't appear that day, or the next. Just as I began to relax, slightly, thinking perhaps the police visit had scared him off, Jen approached me in the break room. "That guy was asking about you," she said, expression troubled. "Wanted to know your schedule. If you had a boyfriend, where you usually take lunch." "What did you tell him?" I asked, stomach clenching. "To get lost," she said. "He gave me serious creep vibes. I told Marcus, and he reviewed the security footage." The footage was more disturbing than I'd anticipated. It showed the man lingering near areas where I worked, touching books I'd just handled, watching me from behind displays. In one particularly chilling sequence, he followed me into the storage room and stood just outside the door, hand raised as if about to reach for the handle before another customer's approach sent him quickly back to the public area. "I'm calling the police," Marcus said grimly, "and I don't want you closing alone anymore. In fact, I'll walk you home until this is resolved." That night, the doorbell rang at exactly 10:17 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw him. The same unremarkable face, now rendered sinister by context. And he was dancing, those same fluid movements I'd seen before. But this time, he was holding something. A small blue book. My journal, which I always carried in my bag. My hand shook as I called 911. "He's at my door again," I whispered, "and he has my personal journal. He must have taken it from my bag at work." By the time police arrived, he was gone, and so was my journal. The invasion of privacy, the idea that he had reached into my bag, taken something deeply personal, read my private thoughts, broke something in me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, jumped at small noises. Dark circles formed under my eyes. Regular customers at the bookshop asked if I was feeling well. The dancing visitor came 3 more times that week, always at 10:17 p.m., always the same movements. After the 3rd visit, I found a note slid under my door in handwriting I recognized from having seen my own journal. "You're so beautiful when you sleep. Your breathing changes when you dream." The words implied something I couldn't bear to consider, that he had been inside my apartment, watched me sleeping. I packed a bag with trembling hands and called Megan. "I'm coming to get you," she said immediately. "Pack whatever you need. You're staying with me until they catch this guy." I spent 2 weeks in Megan's guest room, jumping at sounds, struggling to sleep even with her reassuring presence nearby. I filed a formal police report about the note and its implications, took time off work, spoke with a detective who specialized in stalking cases. She was kind but realistic about the challenges. "These cases are difficult," she explained. "Without threats or physical violence, restraining orders can be hard to obtain. And even with them, enforcement is complicated. So I just have to wait until he hurts me?" I asked, voice breaking. She reached across the table, nearly touching my hand before stopping herself. "Document everything. Change your routines. Consider moving if possible. And please, be careful." After 2 weeks, with no signs of him at Megan's apartment, I began to hope he'd lost interest. Marcus called to check on me, reporting that the man hadn't returned to the bookshop. The security footage showed no one matching his description lurking nearby. "Maybe he's moved on," Megan suggested one evening. "Found someone else to fixate on." The thought brought me no comfort. If not me, then someone else was now the focus of his unsettling attention. Eventually, financial reality forced my return home. I couldn't afford to leave my apartment without breaking my lease, and my savings were dwindling with the time off work. Megan helped me install new locks and additional security, window alarms, A reinforced door frame, a security camera in the hallway, motion sensor lights. For 3 days, nothing happened. No doorbell, no dancing, no notes. I began to breathe easier, to reclaim my space. I scrubbed every surface, rearranged furniture, burned sage in a cleansing ritual Megan insisted would help, if not spiritually, then psychologically. Then, on the fourth night, at exactly 10:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, there he was, dancing. In his hands, my hairbrush, which had been on my bathroom counter that morning. I called 911 immediately, heart pounding so hard I could barely speak. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and away from the door, that officers were on their way. But something in me had reached its breaking point. 2 weeks of fear, of running, of having my life disrupted by this person who felt entitled to my attention, my space, my peace of mind. Anger replaced terror, burning through my veins like wildfire. "I'm done being afraid," I told the dispatcher, setting the phone down despite her protests. I grabbed the pepper spray Megan had insisted I carry in the baseball bat my father had left just in case. Through the peephole, I could see him still dancing, my hairbrush now held reverently to his face. I threw the door open, security chain still in place, creating a narrow gap between us. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, voice stronger than I felt. He stopped dancing, surprise flickering across his face before a smile spread slowly, revealing slightly crooked teeth. "Finally," he said, voice soft with genuine delight. "You've been watching me dance for so long. I thought you'd never come out to play." "I'm not playing," I said. "The police are on their way. You need to leave." His smile faltered. "You called the police? Why would you do that?" "I want you to leave me alone." "But I love you," he said, the words striking me like physical blows. "I've loved you since the first day I saw you at the bookshop. The way you touched the books, so gentle. The way you helped that old woman find her mystery novels. You're kind, special, not like other people." "You don't know me," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You've been stalking me, breaking into my apartment, stealing my things." "I didn't break in," he interrupted, looking genuinely offended. "I have a key." Cold dread washed over me. "How do you have a key?" "I made a copy. When you leave your keys at the counter sometimes, it was easy." His expression softened. "I just wanted to know more about you, to be close to you. We're perfect for each other. I can be your boyfriend now." In the distance, I heard sirens growing louder. His head turned toward the sound, then back to me, expression darkening. "You really called them," he said, voice flat. "After everything I've done for you." "You haven't done anything for me, except terrify me," I said, adjusting my grip on the pepper spray. His face transformed with rage. "I protected you. I watched over you. I danced for you." He slammed his body against the door, the security chain straining against the force. "Let me in." The sirens grew louder. I stepped back from the door, raising the pepper spray. With a final, powerful shove, the security chain snapped. The door flew open. He stood in the doorway for a moment, breathing heavily, eyes wild. "We could have been happy," he said, stepping into my apartment with the confidence of someone returning home. He moved through my space with familiar ease, brushing his fingers along my bookshelf, looking at the photos on my wall. "I know everything about you. Your favorite books, how you take your coffee, The way you curl on your left side to sleep. Get out, I said, pointing the pepper spray at him. The police are almost here. Be my girlfriend, he said, advancing toward me. That's all I want. I've been so patient. Get out, I screamed, backing away until I hit the wall. His face changed then, hope collapsing into rage in an instant. He lunged forward. I pressed the pepper spray button, but in my panic, my aim was off. Most of it missed him. He knocked it from my hand, grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You're just like all the others, he hissed, raising his fist. The blow connected with my temple. Pain exploded behind my eyes. I fell, the world spinning around me. Through blurring vision, I saw him standing over me, chest heaving. I'm sorry, he whispered, suddenly gentle again, kneeling beside me. I didn't mean to hurt you. See what you made me do? The siren stopped outside my building. He looked toward the door, then back at me. I'll come back when you're ready to apologize, he said, stroking my hair once before rushing out the still open door just as heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. I don't remember much after that. The police found me on the floor. Ambulance lights, hospital rooms, the metallic taste of blood, a concussion diagnosis, questions I couldn't answer through the fog of pain and fear. That was 3 months ago. The police still haven't found him, though they have a name now. No prior arrests, but 2 previous complaints of stalking behavior that never led to charges. His apartment was empty when they searched it. Walls covered with photos of me. Journal entries about our relationship. A video camera with footage of me sleeping. I've moved to a new city now. New apartment in a secured building with 24-hour security and cameras in every hallway. New job at a library rather than a bookshop. New hair color and style. I've deleted all social media accounts. Changed my phone number. Created a P.O. box instead of receiving mail at home. But some things can't be erased so easily. I don't answer my door anymore. Don't look through peepholes. The sound of a doorbell makes me physically ill. I sleep with lights on, a chair wedged under my doorknob. I see a therapist twice weekly for PTSD. Sometimes, I wake at exactly 10:17 p.m., certain I've heard dancing outside my door. And I wonder if I'll ever feel safe again, or if he'll keep dancing in the dark corners of my mind forever. A journey to freedom. I never understood obsession until I became its object. Jess and I dated for 14 months in Boston. We met during my final year at MIT. She was completing her undergrad in psychology at BU, ironically enough. The beginning was electric, as beginnings often are. She was brilliant, ambitious, with a laugh that seemed to transform any room she entered. We connected deeply over shared interests in independent films, hiking the trails of New England, and a mutual fascination with behavioral economics. The first red flags appeared when I accepted a position at a consulting firm that required occasional travel to our New York and Chicago offices. What began as reasonable disappointment at our separation evolved into elaborate checking-in rituals, location sharing through Find My Friends, hourly texts, FaceTime calls where she would ask to see my hotel room, ostensibly to feel connected to my surroundings. I just miss you so much, she would say, eyes wide with vulnerability that made my uneasiness feel like a character flaw. Is it wrong to want to be part of your life when we're apart? When I gently suggested the behavior felt excessive, she'd become tearful, accusing me of not understanding her attachment style or emotional needs. I found myself apologizing, adjusting, accommodating, all while a quiet voice within me wondered why connection felt increasingly like surveillance. The relationship ended during my third business trip to Chicago, after I missed our scheduled video call due to an extended client dinner. I returned to 73 text messages, 14 missed calls, and eventually found her waiting in the lobby of my hotel at 2 a.m., having somehow convinced the front desk she was my fiancée and had lost her key. The breakup conversation was surprisingly calm. She nodded with understanding, agreed we wanted different things, and left with a composure that, in retrospect, should have concerned me more than her previous emotional outbursts. "I understand," she said, touching my cheek with cool fingers. "But you'll realize we're meant to be together. Some connections can't be severed simply because they're inconvenient." I felt relief wash over me as I watched her cab pull away from the hotel. I had no way of knowing I had just begun the most destabilizing period of my life. 3 weeks passed in relative normalcy. I returned to Boston, settled back into work, and began the familiar process of disentangling shared digital accounts, returning borrowed items, and adjusting to solitude in my Beacon Hill apartment. The ordinary grief of separation felt manageable, even healthy. Then my colleague Thomas invited me to dinner at an Italian place in the North End and introduced me to his cousin, Sophia, who had just moved to Boston from Seattle. The evening was pleasant, conversation flowing naturally as we discovered shared interests in travel and contemporary fiction. When she suggested meeting for coffee that weekend in Harvard Square, I happily agreed. Our coffee date ended abruptly when Sophia received a text message, glanced at me with sudden wariness, and made an excuse to leave. She never responded to my follow-up message. A similar pattern emerged with Diane, whom I met at a friend's gallery opening in South Boston. After 2 promising dates, she called to cancel our third, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. "I think you should be honest with people," she said cryptically. "I don't appreciate being put in the middle of your situation." "What situation?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I don't want drama. Please don't contact me again." After the third woman disappeared from my life with similar abruptness, I began to suspect a connection. Jamie, who ended things after one dinner at Eastern Standard, finally provided clarity. "Your girlfriend called me," she said when I managed to reach her by phone. "I don't have a girlfriend," I replied, feeling a cold realization settling in my stomach. "Well, someone who says she's your girlfriend. She knew things about our date, what I wore, where we went. She said you were working through some issues but were still committed to her, that you do this sometimes. Date other women during your breaks, but always come back to her." My mind raced through possibilities. Had Jess been following me? How would she know these details? "She seemed worried about you," Jamie continued, her voice softening slightly. "If you're going through something, that's your business. But I'm not interested in complicated situations." After hanging up, I examined my phone for tracking apps, changed all my passwords, and swept my apartment for any devices. Finding nothing, I began paying closer attention to my surroundings. Within days, I noticed Jess's blue Prius parked on Charles Street during odd hours. Once, I glimpsed her in the Starbucks across from my office building in the financial district, sunglasses on, pretending to read. I confronted her via text, requesting she stop monitoring my life. Her response was unsettling. "I'm not monitoring your life. I'm protecting you from making mistakes. These women don't know you like I do. They don't understand what you need. I blocked her number, only to receive emails from newly created accounts, then messages from mutual friends who'd run into her at places like Trident Booksellers or Tat Bakery and were concerned about me based on what she'd shared. My social world began to contract as I withdrew from our shared spaces, uncertain whom to trust. The final breaking point came 6 months after our breakup. I had stopped dating entirely, focused on work, and believed the worst had passed. Then I met Lydia through a professional networking event at the seaport. Careful not to repeat past patterns, we kept our initial interactions entirely within group settings, lunches with colleagues, industry happy hours, a charity fundraiser at the MFA. When no mysterious interventions occurred, I began to hope. Perhaps Jess had moved on. Perhaps I had been overreacting. Lydia and I finally arranged a proper date. Dinner at a new restaurant in Cambridge, far from my usual haunts. The evening was magical, the kind that reminds you why human connection is worth its inherent risks. Walking her home to her apartment near Porter Square, we made plans for the weekend. 3 days later, Lydia sent a message canceling our plans. Her tone was different, not fearful or judgmental, but concerned. "Someone claiming to be your girlfriend came to the workplace today," she wrote. "She seemed unstable. She had pictures of us together from our date, pictures I didn't know anyone was taking. She said if I continued seeing you, she would contact my boss with some story about misconduct. I'm sorry, but this is too much." That night, I found my car window smashed in my apartment building's garage. Nothing was stolen, but a small envelope lay on the driver's seat containing printed photos of Lydia and me at dinner, walking together, saying goodnight. On the back of one photo, in familiar handwriting, "No one will ever love you like I do. Why do you keep hurting me?" 2 weeks later, I encountered Jess directly. She was waiting beside my car after work, looking somehow both vulnerable and triumphant. "We need to talk," she said simply. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a conversation in the public atrium of the building. What followed was a surreal negotiation about our non-existent relationship. "I've been patient," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I've given you space to explore other options and realize what we have is special. But my patience is running out. Jess, we broke up months ago. There is no relationship to discuss." Her expression hardened. "You don't get to decide that unilaterally. Relationships take work, commitment. You can't just walk away because things get difficult. Following me, interfering with my personal life, frightening women I date, that's not a relationship. That's stalking." The word hung between us. Her eyes narrowed. "If you won't choose me willingly, then I'll make sure no one else chooses you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Either we try again, really try, or I will make sure you regret rejecting me every single day. This isn't a threat, it's a promise." The calculated nature of her words, delivered without emotion, terrified me more than any outburst could have. I found myself nodding, searching for a way out. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." She smiled, reaching out to touch my arm. I forced myself not to recoil. "Take tonight. Call me tomorrow. We can meet for lunch and discuss our future. But don't try to avoid this conversation again. You won't like the consequences." I went home and packed a single suitcase. I withdrew cash from multiple ATMs, called in sick to work via email, and booked a red-eye flight to San Francisco using a travel site I'd never used before. I left my phone in a drawer, purchased a burner at a convenience store, and texted my closest friend from the airport using a code we'd established weeks earlier when I first shared my concerns. The concert was canceled. Staying with my cousin instead. Hold my mail? He would understand. The situation had escalated. I was implementing our emergency plan. He would file a missing persons report after an appropriate delay if he didn't hear from me through our secondary channel, making sure the detective understood the circumstances. As the plane took off from Logan Airport, I felt a mixture of shame, relief, and grief. I was leaving behind a career I'd worked hard to build, friends who mattered deeply to me, a city I loved, all because I couldn't find a way to be safe in my own life. That was 3 years ago. I've since lived in 7 cities across the country, never staying longer than 6 months, working remotely when possible, using cash. I've grown a beard, altered my appearance in subtle ways. I maintain contact with only 2 people from my previous life, through carefully established, secure channels. A few months ago, I received a message from my friend in Boston. The detective who handled my case contacted him. Jess was arrested for stalking her therapist, who had apparently tried to help her address her obsessive patterns. The officer wanted to know if I would consider giving a statement about my experience. I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to contribute to creating a record that might help protect others. Part of me fears any contact, even through official channels, could reawaken her fixation. It was a surreal negotiation about our non-existent relationship. "I've been patient," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I've given you space to explore other options and realize what we have is special. But my patience is running out. Jess, we broke up months ago. There is no relationship to discuss." Her expression hardened. "You don't get to decide that unilaterally. Relationships take work, commitment. You can't just walk away because things get difficult. Following me, interfering with my personal life, frightening women I date, that's not a relationship. That's stalking." The word hung between us. Her eyes narrowed. "If you won't choose me willingly, then I'll make sure no one else chooses you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Either we try again, really try, or I will make sure you regret rejecting me every single day. This isn't a threat, it's a promise." The calculated nature of her words, delivered without emotion, terrified me more than any outburst could have. I found myself nodding, searching for a way out. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." She smiled, reaching out to touch my arm. I forced myself not to recoil. "Take tonight. Call me tomorrow. We can meet for lunch and discuss our future. But don't try to avoid this conversation again. You won't like the consequences." I went home and packed a single suitcase. I withdrew cash from multiple ATMs, called in sick to work via email, and booked a red-eye flight to San Francisco using a travel site I'd never used before. I left my phone in a drawer, purchased a burner at a convenience store, and texted my closest friend from the airport using a code we'd established weeks earlier when I first shared my concerns. The concert was canceled. Staying with my cousin instead. Hold my mail? He would understand. The situation had escalated. I was implementing our emergency plan. He would file a missing persons report after an appropriate delay if he didn't hear from me through our secondary channel, making sure the detective understood the circumstances. As the plane took off from Logan Airport, I felt a mixture of shame, relief, and grief. I was leaving behind a career I'd worked hard to build, friends who mattered deeply to me, a city I loved, all because I couldn't find a way to be safe in my own life. That was 3 years ago. I've since lived in 7 cities across the country, never staying longer than 6 months, working remotely when possible, using cash. I've grown a beard, altered my appearance in subtle ways. I maintain contact with only 2 people from my previous life, through carefully established, secure channels. A few months ago, I received a message from my friend in Boston. The detective who handled my case contacted him. Jess was arrested for stalking her therapist, who had apparently tried to help her address her obsessive patterns. The officer wanted to know if I would consider giving a statement about my experience. I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to contribute to creating a record that might help protect others. Part of me fears any contact, even through official channels, could reawaken her fixation.